I still remember the way the world seemed to stop when she first told me. It was late autumn, the kind of night when the wind rattles the windows like restless fingers. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands trembling, her eyes shining with tears that looked rehearsed yet still cut through me like knives. "Baby, I went to the doctor," she whispered, her voice breaking. It's cancer." The word hit me like a truck. My throat closed, my chest tightened, and my heart started pounding in my ears. Cancer. That word carried the weight of death, of endings, of hopeless futures. And she was my whole world. My wife. The woman I had built my life around. I pushed back from the table and fell to my knees beside her, clutching her hands. "No, no, no, this can't be. There has to be a mistake." She shook her head, tears sliding down her cheeks. "They caught it late. The doctors said it's aggressive. But there's treatment. It's expensive, experimental. We have to act fast." I didn't hesitate. Not for a second. I told her I would sell whatever I had to, work day and night, borrow, beg, anything to save her. She melted into my arms, burying her face against my chest, and for the first time in years I felt us bound together in raw, terrifying intimacy. The days that followed blurred into a haze of hospital visits, paperwork, and whispered phone calls. She would leave with her overnight bag, saying she was going for chemo, and return hours later looking pale, but oddly radiant. Sometimes, when I tried to hold her, she'd push me away gently. "I'm too weak," she'd murmur, and I'd nod, swallowing the ache of desire. I told myself she was fragile, that she needed tenderness, not the kind of fire that used to consume us. But it was hard. Watching her undress at night, slipping into bed with me, her body still perfect, her skin smooth, her curves tempting, and yet untouchable. There were moments when she would catch me staring, and her lips would curve into a sly smile, a flicker of the woman who once tangled with me beneath the sheets with reckless abandon. That smile would burn through me, awaken the hunger I had tried to bury. But then she'd turn away, coughing lightly, reminding me of her sickness, and I'd retreat, ashamed of wanting her at all. As weeks passed, the bills piled higher. She told me the treatments weren't covered by insurance, that she had to pay the doctors in cash. I handed her envelopes stuffed with money, sometimes my whole paycheck, sometimes loans I took from friends. Every time, she'd kiss me with trembling lips, whispering, "You're saving me." But doubt crept in slowly. The receipts she showed me were vague, handwritten, with hospital names scribbled almost illegibly. The medications she brought home looked generic, labels peeled away. And one evening, when I dropped by the hospital unannounced, intending to surprise her, the nurse at the desk gave me a blank look. "She hasn't been admitted here in months," the nurse said. My stomach turned cold. I stumbled back into the hallway, my head spinning. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe she used a different wing, maybe a different hospital. But in that moment, something inside me cracked. When I got home that night, she was there, curled on the couch, sipping wine. She smiled at me, her lips glistening, her dress clinging to her curves in a way that mocked the idea of sickness. "How was work?" she asked sweetly, setting the glass aside. I kissed her forehead, but inside me, a storm was brewing. Because I had just realized, the real illness might not be in her body at all. The next morning I woke with the taste of copper and a certainty I couldn't swallow. The wind had died, but the house felt louder. Every pipe groaned, every floorboard tattled on my steps. She slept on her side of the bed, hair fanned across the pillow. Sick, I reminded myself. Fragile. Except the glass of Cabernet on her nightstand was half full, and the lipstick on the rim looked fresh. I made coffee and sat with our bills. Numbers don't lie, people do. I wrote dates, tried to match the cash withdrawals with the chemo schedule she'd texted. Tuesday, Friday, Sunday. The bank showed Tuesday and Saturday. The hospital's front desk swore she hadn't been in their system since spring. I hung up before my voice shook. At work, code blurred into static. I opened a blank note and listed what I knew. No official receipts. All cash, fatigue that vanished when she thought I wasn't looking. I added a line I hated. No intimacy for 3 months. Even the memory of her pressing her thigh against mine in the elevator, 2 strangers between us, was suspicious now. By lunch I couldn't take the not knowing. I called a private investigator recommended by a friend who never asked questions. The PI's voice had gravel. "I'll need a week," he said. "Give me her routine, vehicles, places she says she goes. I emailed him the calendar she'd shared. Clinic visits, meditation classes, a nutritionist who only accepted cash. That evening I told her I had to work late. Instead, I parked 2 blocks from the meditation studio and waited. When she appeared, she wasn't in sweats and a hoodie. She wore a fitted cream dress and an overcoat draped like a promise. She moved with the lightness of a woman headed toward pleasure, not a drip. A dark sedan slid to the curb, and she got in without looking back. I followed at a distance, palms slick. The sedan stopped at a spa that reeks of eucalyptus and money. I watched her float inside, then texted. How's class? Need anything? 3 dots. Breathing exercises running long. Home after. Behind a frosted logo, a man in a charcoal suit kissed her cheek. His hand lingered at her waist. Back home she came in near midnight, hair damp, eyes bright, an expensive glow clinging to her skin. You're up, she said softly. The scent of sandalwood radiated off her. She crossed the room and brushed my jaw with her thumbs, slow, suggestive. Heat smoldered under my ribs in spite of myself. Was the breathing good? I asked. The best, she murmured, leaning in so her lips almost touched mine. The almost was deliberate. I'm exhausted. After she showered, she slipped into silk and crawled under the comforter. I lay beside her and watched the ceiling. The ache was no longer just desire. It was the pain of a man who suspects the ground isn't solid. I thought of the nurse's blank look, the spa's mirrored hallways, the man's hand at her waist. I thought of envelopes emptied of hope. Near dawn, my phone buzzed with a message from the PI. A single line. You were right to call. Attached were 2 grainy photos, her laughing at the spa bar, her hand on the forearm of the man in the charcoal suit. The timestamps overlapped with the hours she said she'd be hooked to a drip. Proof isn't always a hammer. Sometimes it's a whisper that never stops. I brewed coffee and stared out the window until the world turned gray-blue. When she came into the kitchen, robe belted, hair damp again, she kissed my cheek. I dreamed we were on a beach, she said lightly, hands sliding around my waist. The brush of her body sent a jolt through me. My hands rose to her hips out of habit. She felt me tense and smiled. Maybe she did. But as I pulled away, something inside me hardened into plan. I wouldn't accuse her, not yet. I would be patient, colder than steel, and twice as quiet. If she wanted theater, I'd build a stage. And when the curtain rose, she would hear the truth the way I had, suddenly, completely, and without mercy. The PI's photos burned in my pocket like a secret flame. Each time I looked at her, the images of her laughing in that spa, her hand resting on another man's arm, replayed in my mind. Yet when she glanced up from her tea, her lips curling into a tired smile, I forced my own lips to soften. If she could lie, so could I. I knew better than to rush. Rage is loud, and loud men lose. If I wanted justice, if I wanted revenge, I had to be patient. I had to make her believe I was still the same blind, devoted husband. That evening, I surprised her with takeout from her favorite Thai restaurant. She blinked, clearly caught off guard. You didn't have to do this, she murmured, drawing me into a hug. Her hair smelled of lavender shampoo, and when her body pressed against mine, I felt that familiar ache again, a cruel reminder of what once was ours. She leaned her head against my chest, and for a second I wondered if she could hear the pounding of my heart. We ate in silence until she began her performance. The doctor says the treatments are taking a toll. I might need another round next month. It's going to be even more expensive. Her voice cracked on the last word. She was good. Too good. I swallowed noodles and nodded solemnly. Don't worry about the money. I'll handle it. Her eyes glistened. She reached across the table, brushing her fingers over mine. You're saving me, she whispered. The same words as before. Practiced. Hollow. Later, in bed, she slipped beneath the sheets in a camisole that left little to the imagination. The sight of her curves in the dim light stoked my hunger, the kind that had been denied for months. My body reacted instinctively, traitorously, while my mind screamed at me to remember the photos. She noticed, of course. A sly smirk tugged at her lips. She pressed her thigh against mine, teasing, testing. And then, just as heat surged between us, she rolled away. I'm too tired, she said, voice dripping with mock frailty. The tension snapped, leaving me stranded in a fog of frustration. I lay awake long after her breathing slowed, staring at the ceiling. She thought she controlled me with that mix of desire and denial, and maybe once she had. But now it was fuel. Every glance, every touch withheld, every dollar drained. It was all going into the fire I was building. The next day, I called the PI again. I need more than photos, I said. I need proof of where the money's going. He didn't hesitate. Leave it to me. By the weekend, I had a new set of documents. Bank transfers, hotel bookings, receipts from luxury spas. All tied to her name. All paid in cash. And alongside it, a revelation I hadn't expected. She wasn't just spending my money on herself. She was funneling part of it into an account that belonged to the man in the charcoal suit. That discovery nearly broke me. Betrayal cut deep enough, but financing her lover with my sacrifice? That was a blade twisted in the wound. I sat in the car outside our home, gripping the wheel until my knuckles turned white. I could have stormed inside, thrown the evidence at her, demanded answers. But I pictured her eyes filling with tears, her voice trembling as she spun another story, another web of lies, and I knew she'd try to make me the villain. Not this time. Instead, I walked inside calmly, kissed her cheek, and asked about her day. She smiled sweetly, as if she hadn't just siphoned my life away. And that was when I decided I wouldn't just expose her. I would destroy the illusion she had built piece by piece, until the only thing left was the truth and her shame. For now, I would play along. Let her think she was winning. Let her believe I was still blind. Because when I finally opened her eyes for her, it would be in front of everyone she had ever fooled. And that moment would be worth every second of patience. By Monday, I had learned how to nod at her without blinking. She mentioned fatigue after chemo, then casually asked if my bonus had cleared. I said no. It had, 2 days earlier. I was testing not just the lie, but the hunger behind it. Her mouth tightened a fraction. Then she exhaled a perfect sigh and pressed my hand. "We'll get through this," she said saint-like. That night I cooked, lit candles, poured her the herbal tea she swore calmed her stomach. She crooked a finger at me, slow and deliberate. The robe slipped from her shoulder, showing a slick edge of silk. Desire throbbed through me. She knew it. She leaned in until her breath warmed my ear. "You're my rock," she whispered. Then, lightly, "I need another 5,000. The clinic requires prepayment for the next cycle." I let the silence stretch until a candle hissed. "We'll manage," I said at last, and watched relief soften her. Her hand trailed my forearm, casual, claiming. A month ago, I would have carried her to bed. Tonight, I stacked plates and ran water until it went cold. When she showered, I opened the PI's email. Transfers out, cash withdrawals in, a reservation for a recovery suite at the spa, 3 nights, champagne included. Every lie wore the crisp edge of an invoice. I filed it in a private folder named with boredom. Taxes_2021. On Wednesday, she announced a new rule. "No kissing for a while," she said, drawing back when I reached for her. My immune system. She bit her lip and left the gesture hanging like bait. The tease and refusal made my body ache, and clarity followed. She choreographed our intimacy like a stage manager. She set the temperature. My hunger was her spotlight. I began leaving small traps. I asked for the name of her oncologist, then forgot it and asked again 2 days later. The spelling changed. I requested the clinic's address so I could send flowers. She answered too quickly, then corrected herself an hour later. I printed both versions and filed them beside the photos of her at the spa bar, laughing with the man in the charcoal suit. Thursday, I followed her again. No meditation class this time. A hotel with smoked glass and a lobby piano. She was not a patient in those lights. She walked like the world belonged to her. The man waited near the elevators. They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. He brushed her hair. She leaned into him. Back home, she was airy, affectionate, almost playful. She slid behind me while I washed dishes, pressing her chest to my back, hands at my waist, breath warm at my neck. "You're tense," she murmured, hips moving in a slow rhythm that made my skin burn. I turned, caging her against the counter, hunger sparking. For a heartbeat, she let me see it. The memory of what we used to do when the house fell silent. Then she placed 2 fingers on my lips. "Delicate," she said softly. "I can't risk getting sicker." I nodded, as if I agreed with the law of her body. Inside, the plan thickened. The next morning, I called the PI and asked for bank trails, where the cash went after it left my hands. By evening, he had a ledger. Deposits into her account, withdrawals the same day, transfers into a tidy little nest belonging to Mr. Charcoal's suit. My sacrifice, wired with clinical precision. I stared at the numbers until they blurred, then rewrote them on a yellow pad in my own hand, column by column, like carving headstones. It wasn't just betrayal. It was administration. That weekend I designed the outer shell of a plan, a slideshow of our journey, a guest list of everyone she'd enlisted as witnesses to her suffering, a venue she adored. Our anniversary would be its heart, a night she could not refuse. I wrote a speech so gentle it made my eyes sting, then tucked the truth between lines like glass beneath velvet. She drifted through the house humming, light as air. When I offered to drive her to the clinic, she declined with a peck on my cheek and a promise to text updates. I watched her car disappear, then opened my laptop and rehearsed the order of slides. Wedding day, first apartment, our trips, her treatment bracelets, the receipts, the spa suite, the transfers, the man. A story that began like a prayer and ended like a verdict. Before sleep, she crawled across the bed and straddled my hips, palms on my chest, hair falling like a curtain. The heat of her weight made my pulse hammer. The promise of closeness crackled in the dark. She leaned down, lips a breath from mine. If I weren't sick, she whispered, I would ruin you. The words she didn't say glowed between us like a coal. My hands slid to her thighs. She shivered, then eased away with a soft laugh, rolling to her side. Soon, she said, when the treatment ends. It will, I thought, and stared at the ceiling until the room faded to gray. The treatment was ending, just not the way she imagined. The anniversary was 2 weeks away when the PI called again, his voice carrying the rough edge of disbelief. You asked me to follow the money. I did. But your wife isn't only playing sick to bleed you dry. She's got a bigger angle, and you're the target. I gripped the phone tighter. Bigger angle? She took out a life insurance policy. On you. Large payout, no questions asked. She's the sole beneficiary. The air in my office thinned. My chair suddenly felt too small, my body too heavy. For months, I had believed the betrayal was about sympathy, attention, cash for spas and luxury. But this was darker, colder. Not just deception, it was planning for my absence. I forced my voice steady. Are you certain? Paperwork is clean. Signed 6 months ago. Premiums paid in cash. I don't need to tell you what that means. I ended the call and stared at my reflection in the black screen of my monitor. For the first time, fear mingled with the anger simmering inside me. She wasn't just draining me. She was betting on my death. That evening, she floated into the kitchen in a silk robe, cheeks glowing from a long treatment. She poured herself wine, humming softly, and smiled as if the world were hers to command. When she kissed me lightly on the lips, the scent of sandalwood clung to her skin. Bad day? She asked, tilting her head like a saint. I studied her face, memorizing the lines of a woman who could invent cancer and forge invoices, who could look me in the eye while filing for insurance that required my body cold. No, I said evenly. A good day? I was thinking about our anniversary. Her eyes lit. Already planning? I want it to be unforgettable, I told her. And she laughed, brushing her fingers along my jaw. The same fingers that signed her name on my policy. In the days that followed, I wove the fear into my plan. Every receipt, every bank transfer, every hotel booking, now joined by copies of the insurance policy. The slideshow I was building wasn't just about lies anymore. It was about a motive so black it could not be excused. I rehearsed the reveal in my head while pretending to be the doting husband. I drove her to boutiques, carried shopping bags, listened to her stories about doctors and side effects. At night, when she slid against me with a teasing smile, I played along, letting her think the hook still held me fast. She'd murmur about being too fragile, and I'd nod, smiling like a fool. Inside, though, every word carved deeper into my resolve. Once, she leaned close in bed, lips brushing my ear. When this is all over, we'll start fresh. New house, new city, just us. Her hand drifted across my chest, a promise of the intimacy she'd dangled for months. I let her speak, let her imagine the future she'd built on sand. My mind was already painting a different picture, a room full of people, her mask ripped away in one cruel instant. The PI delivered more photos, her and the man in charcoal, dining in restaurants, laughing over champagne, their hands linked beneath linen tablecloths. I slid them into my folder. Each image was a brick in the wall I would one day crush her with. But I needed more than exposure. I needed spectacle. If she could lie so beautifully, she deserved to fall in the ugliest light possible. So I began making calls. I booked the restaurant she adored, the one with the rooftop view of the city lights. I told her it was a surprise for our anniversary, and her eyes softened with gratitude. "You're incredible," she whispered, pressing her lips to mine, heat flickering between us like a cruel trick. Later that night, I stood at the window long after she'd fallen asleep, her body curled into mine. The city stretched beyond the glass, glittering and indifferent. I thought of the policy with my name on it, the spa nights, the stolen money, the way she wielded desire like a blade. She believed she was the author of this story. But in 2 weeks, when the lights dimmed and the first slides appeared on the screen, the truth would write itself across her face. And everyone would see her for what she really was. The week before the anniversary, I became a man of small, precise movements. I learned how to smile while carrying a phial of poison. I learned how to fold a receipt so the crease hid the stain of betrayal. I learned how to be ordinary in the most extraordinary hour of my life. First, logistics. The rooftop restaurant she loved, the one with soft lanterns and a view that made strangers pretend to be poets, was booked under my name for the anniversary. I told them I wanted a slideshow, subtle lighting, and a private room with a screen. The manager, obliging and slightly bored by romance requests, promised discretion. "We'll make it tasteful," he said. I let him think the slideshow would be about vacations and wedding photos. Let her expect a tear-jerking evening. Spectacle tastes better served with silver and sugar. Next, the evidence. The PI handed me a neat stack of documents and an envelope of photos. I copied bank statements, highlighted transfers, printed the policy papers with the beneficiary clause circled. I had the spa receipts, hotel bookings, champagne tabs, and the ledger of cash withdrawals. Each sheet I laminated into a cold, permanent truth. Beneath each image I typed the dates, the times, and the names, plain facts, the sort of clarity that leaves no room for the velvet lies she loved to wrap around herself. I worked on the speech until my voice grew hoarse from practice. It had to be equal parts tenderness and knife, gentle at first, then sharp as glass. I wrote an opening about love and fear, about how crisis reveals character. I planned to begin with gratitude, for friends who stood by us, for family who prayed, for strangers who pitied us. Then the pivot. The room would feel safe. Then I would show them how unsafe it had all been. But a spectacle is only as strong as the people in it. I needed witnesses who couldn't be waved away as biased or confused. So I called a few names she'd never suspect. Colleagues who had seen her at work, a cousin who'd flown in for the weekend, the nurse from the clinic who'd once given me that blank look. I called my sister and asked her to bring her husband. I called a friend from college who still had that unforgiving honesty I admired. Each person I invited gave me a thread of support I could weave into a net. There was one person I didn't tell her about, her best friend, Claire. I approached Claire with careful truth and darker motives than charity. I told her what I had found, showed her the photos. Her face changed slowly, like someone watching a beloved illusion dissolve. She listened, then nodded. "I didn't want to see," she said, "but I'll be there." She agreed to come early, to sit in the front row, to speak if asked. I didn't ask why she turned on her friend. I didn't need the reason. I only needed her to be a mirror that would reflect back what my slides would show. I arranged the tech, 2 projectors, a remote clicker, high-quality printouts for guests to hold if they wanted to follow. I printed copies of the insurance policy to distribute at the right moment. I hired a photographer to document reactions. Proof of her humiliation needed its own witness, crisp and undeniable. Worst of all, I rehearsed the part of the caring husband. I bought new shirts. I practiced the way I would press my hand to her arm and speak softly about perseverance. I let her see the carpenter of her ruin, a man measured and calm. She kept complaining about fatigue. I brought her flowers and kissed her forehead in public. Each tender gesture was a smokescreen I layered over the flamethrower underneath. There were nights when she crawled into bed and I felt the old ache, desire that once had no list of instructions. She would toss a leg over mine, whisper a memory, a promise. I would trace the line of her jaw and feel nothing but the planning pulse beneath my skin. The tension between us was electric and terrible. Her proximity was fuel. Her refusals were the spark I used to light the wick. Everything had to be perfect. Timing, tone, the click of the remote. The trap was simple in its cruelty. I would give her the stage she wanted, the music, the candles, the friends, and then, with the same hands that once tenderly smoothed her hair, I would pull back the curtain. The truth would not be an accusation, but a narrative arc that the room could see and understand in an instant. On the morning of the anniversary, I slept for 1 hour. My mind rehearsed the speech, the slide order, Claire's signal. I dressed in a suit that fit like an apology long overdue. When she kissed me goodbye that evening, perfumed, fragile, smiling, I smiled back and felt no heat. The trap was set. The audience was arriving. The curtains would rise. The evening came dressed in gold. The city skyline stretched beyond the glass walls of the rooftop restaurant, glowing like it had been set alight just for us. She stepped out of the elevator in a crimson dress that hugged her body like fire, a shawl slipping from one bare shoulder. Heads turned. My chest tightened, not from love, but from the cruel irony. She looked like life itself, not a woman battling death. She slipped her arm through mine. "This is beautiful," she whispered, her perfume curling around me like smoke. I smiled, pressing her hand lightly. If she felt the tremor in my fingers, she mistook it for devotion. Guests rose as we entered. Friends, family, colleagues, all faces she had carefully cultivated as her audience over the past year. She greeted them with fragile warmth, the glow of a survivor. I watched her perform, every hug, every tilt of her head perfectly rehearsed. They saw bravery. I saw theft wrapped in silk. The dinner was drawn out, courses arriving with slow ceremony. She touched my knee beneath the table, her smile daring, intimate, as though to remind me she still controlled the fire between us. My body reacted despite the acid boiling in my gut. Her power had always been this combination of allure and denial. Give a spark, then withhold the flame. But tonight, I reminded myself, she wouldn't be the one holding the match. After dessert, the lights dimmed. A hush spread. She turned to me, eyes shimmering with anticipation. "You planned something, didn't you?" She teased softly. "Yes," I said, standing. "For us." I stepped to the podium as the projector hummed to life. The first slide appeared. Our wedding day, her smile radiant, my arm tight around her waist. The room sighed. She pressed a hand to her chest, playing the role of the humbled wife. Slide 2. Our first apartment, a photo of us painting walls, flecks of blue in her hair. Laughter filled the room. Slide 3. A vacation, sunsets and holding hands. The guests were spellbound, drifting deeper into nostalgia. She leaned back in her chair, basking in the glow. Then the next image appeared. A hospital receipt. Handwritten, crude, with the date circled in red. "This," I said into the microphone, "is the treatment bill my wife showed me." Murmurs rippled. I clicked again. The nurse's written statement. No patient by this name admitted in these months. The room shifted. She laughed nervously, brushing her hair back. "Oh, honey, what is this?" But I was already clicking forward. Photos of her at the spa, glass of champagne raised, hair glossy. The audience stilled. Another click. Her stepping into the hotel lobby, the man in the charcoal suit waiting, his hand resting at her waist. Gasps broke the silence. Her chair scraped against the floor. "This is twisted. These are lies," she cried, her voice shrill. "Not lies," I said calmly, advancing to the next slide. Documents. The screen filled with transfers, her name, his account. More gasps. My sister covered her mouth. Her best friend Claire, sitting front row, stared with wide, hollow eyes. And then, the final blow. The insurance policy. My name in bold, her signature beneath sole beneficiary. The room erupted. Some cursed. Some wept. Her face drained of color. She stumbled forward, her hands outstretched. "No, no, you don't understand." But Claire stood. Her voice cut through the chaos. "We understand perfectly. You lied to me too." The room fell silent again. The betrayal had multiplied, echoed. The net was closing. I let the silence linger, then spoke into the microphone with a voice that no longer trembled. "For a year, she let you believe she was dying. She drained me. She fed another man. She even placed a bet on my death. And tonight, on our anniversary, I thought the least I could do was give her what she gave me, the truth. The lights returned. She stood frozen, eyes darting like a trapped animal. The dress that had commanded attention now looked like a costume. The guests avoided her gaze. Even her lover, the man in charcoal, was nowhere to be found. She was utterly, terrifyingly alone. I set the clicker down, folded my speech, and walked past her without touching her hand. Behind me, voices rose, some angry, some pitying, all condemning. The performance was over. And for the first time in months, I felt free. The rooftop was no longer a restaurant. It was a courtroom. Forks lay abandoned. Half-filled glasses of wine reflected the trembling lantern light, and all eyes drilled into her. My wife clutched at the back of a chair as though it could anchor her, but the ground beneath her had already vanished. She opened her mouth, a desperate smile plastered across her face. This is a mistake. He must have been tricked. These photos, these papers. No. Claire's voice rang clear, steady. She stepped into the center of the room, her heels clicking like a gavel striking oak. There was no trick. I helped him gather it all. The silence that followed was heavier than any accusation. My wife turned to her friend, her closest friend, with disbelief flooding her features. You? No. Claire, you've known me since we were girls. You wouldn't. Claire's eyes glistened, but her mouth was firm. I believed you at first. I cried with you. I told people how brave you were. But the stories didn't add up. When your husband came to me with proof, I couldn't ignore it anymore. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. You told me you were at chemo. I was there. I saw you step out of the spa with him. She tapped her screen and the recording played. Laughter, my wife's voice, a man's low murmur, the sound of a cork popping. The guests gasped. My wife staggered back, her face crumpling. You spied on me? No, Claire said sharply. I opened my eyes. For a moment my wife looked like she might strike her, but then she saw the faces surrounding her. Disgust, pity, judgment. She tried to rally. So what if I needed comfort? Do you all know what it's like to stare death in the face? Death. I cut in, my voice slicing through hers. I lifted a copy of the policy, shaking it once for emphasis. You didn't stare at death. You wagered on mine. That line cracked whatever was left. Murmurs filled the room again, some people standing, some shaking their heads. My wife pressed her palms to her temples, as though she could squeeze the night into silence. Claire stepped closer, lowering her voice but letting the whole room hear. You dragged me into your lies. You used me as your alibi. Do you remember telling me you needed me to drive you to the hospital? And then you disappeared for hours? I thought I was helping you fight for your life. Her voice shook with fury. All this time, you were fighting for my silence. Tears finally spilled down my wife's cheeks, but they were not the tears of a victim. They were the tears of a cornered animal. She reached toward me. Please, let's go home. We can talk. I stepped back. The crowd shifted with me, as though the space between us had become a moat. Home, I said softly. There's no home left. You burned it with every lie, every dollar, every night you chose someone else over me. The weight of it all pressed down on her. Her shoulders sagged, her crimson dress suddenly too heavy, too bright under the harsh light. She turned back to Claire, but Claire had already walked away, joining my sister at the far end of the room. The betrayal of her best friend had cut deeper than my revelations. It was the twist she had never accounted for, the betrayal she never saw coming. The restaurant manager coughed discreetly, offering to end the evening. But I raised a hand. Not yet. She deserves her applause. And then the room erupted, not with clapping, but with voices. Some shouting, some muttering, some simply leaving with shaking heads. Every sound was a verdict, every step away another nail in the coffin of her illusion. She tried to follow one guest, then another, but no one met her eyes. She was drowning, and there were no lifelines left. Even the man in the charcoal suit, the one she had built her second life with, had slipped away before the lights came back on. By the time the last slide disappeared and the projector hummed into silence, she was alone at the center of the room. All her scripts, her rehearsed tears, her fragile smiles, they had turned to ash. I walked past her toward the exit, my voice steady. Happy anniversary. The door closed behind me, sealing her inside the cage she'd built for herself. The elevator doors closed on the rooftop clamor, and for the first time in months, I heard only my own breath. I walked into the night air and felt weight leave my shoulders one vertebra at a time. She called before I reached the garage. Then again, I let it ring until the third call. Silence first, then a ragged inhale. "Please," she said, voice stripped of silk. "Don't do this in front of everyone. Come home. We can fix it." "There is no we," I said. "There is a ledger, a policy, and a man in hotel lobbies. There is the truth." "I was scared," she whispered. "It got out of hand. You began with a diagnosis you never had and ended with a bet on my body," I replied. "That isn't fear. That's design." She sobbed, a sound that once would have split me. Now it only echoed against concrete. "Just come home," she begged. "Let's talk." I drove instead to a small hotel by the river and checked in under my middle name. In the room, I laid out the final pieces of the plan: a manila envelope, a prepaid ticket, letters for the bank, and my attorney. The printer word, temporary separation papers slid out, crisp and indifferent. I signed where the flags told me to sign, calm as someone assembling a bridge he's already crossed. At dawn, I returned to the house. The room smelled like last night's flowers. She waited in the kitchen, barefoot in the same red dress, the shawl crumpled on a chair. Mascara stained her cheeks. For a moment, I saw the girl I once loved. Then she spoke. "You humiliated me," she said hoarsely. "You made me a spectacle. You asked for an audience," I said. "I only changed the script." She reached for me. "I'll pay it back. I'll get help." Her hand hovered at my chest. Warm breath, old reflexes, the tilt of the room I knew too well. I stepped back. "Sit," I said, and placed the manila envelope on the table. She obeyed. I slid it toward her. "Inside is a prepaid ticket to your sister's city. One way. A hotel booked for 2 weeks. Enough cash to keep you fed while you find a job." Her eyes flashed. "You think you can send me away like luggage?" "I think you need distance from the mirror this house has become," I said. "And I need safety from whatever else you planned." I set down a second stack of papers. "These are separation documents. My lawyer will file them this afternoon." She tore the ticket in half. Red pieces fluttered like birds. "I'm not going anywhere." I folded a fresh copy from the envelope's interior and laid it beside the first. "There are 6 more," I said. "You can shred paper all morning. The flight still leaves tonight." Her rage drained as fast as it rose. She sagged. "What do you want from me?" she asked, smaller now. "The house by the river is in my name," I said. "I'll keep it. The car you prefer is leased under yours. Keep it. I'll freeze the joint accounts and replace them with allowances through counsel. You will sign a statement admitting the false illness and the transfers. In return, I won't pursue criminal charges." She stared at the documents. The silence between us changed shape, less a void than a cliff. "And if I refuse? Then the police see everything, including the policy with my name on it." Her shoulders curled inward. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered. "You meant to win," I said. "This is what losing looks like." I lifted my overnight bag. At the threshold, I paused. She stood over the table, head bowed, the fresh ticket gleaming like a warning. "A car will pick you up at 6, I said. "If you're not in it. My attorney calls the detective at 7. She didn't answer. I closed the door and stepped into the new quiet of my life. The morning smelled like rain. Beyond the river, a plane traced a line across the pale sky. I imagined it carrying away the last of her theater, the last of my belief. Freedom had a sound, the lightness in my chest as the lock clicked behind me, and stayed that way. I didn't go back to the house that night. I sat by the river instead, watching the water slip past the stone embankment, black and endless. The city lights blinked against the current like nervous eyes. My phone lay silent beside me. For once, I didn't wait for her to call. At 6 sharp, the car I'd ordered pulled into our driveway. I wasn't there, but the driver later confirmed what I already knew. She stepped out in sunglasses, clutching a single suitcase, her shoulders hunched as though the night itself pressed down on her. She boarded the flight. She had no choice. Fear makes good shackles. By 7, my attorney had filed the separation papers. Copies of her confession letter, written shakily at the kitchen table under my stare, were sealed in envelopes marked for my bank, my lawyer, and, if needed, the police. For the first time in a year, my safety didn't depend on her whims. The following weeks were quieter than I imagined. At work, colleagues asked about her, some with pity, others with curiosity. I simply said the truth: she's gone. Those 2 words carried more relief than I'd thought possible. Nights were lonelier, yes, but loneliness was clean. Betrayal had been suffocating, sticky, like smoke that wouldn't leave your lungs. She called once, from her sister's number. Her voice was smaller, trembling. "I'm sorry," she said. "I don't expect forgiveness. But I want you to know, it wasn't always lies. I loved you once." Once. That word slid into me like a blade dulled by time. I almost laughed. "You love the stage," I told her. "You love the applause. And you love my blindness." Then I hung up and blocked the number. Love built on deceit is only theater, and her show had closed. The real revenge wasn't the slideshow, though it shattered her mask. It wasn't even the ticket, though it forced her into exile. No, the final revenge was quieter. It was survival. It was the fact that she had gambled on my death, and here I stood, alive, breathing, free. Every sunrise I woke to without her lies was a victory she could never erase. Months later, word reached me through a cousin. The man in the charcoal suit had left her, cut ties clean. She was living in a cramped apartment, taking odd jobs, her reputation in ashes. Friends avoided her. Family spoke of her in whispers. The woman who once bathed herself in sympathy now drowned in her own silence. One evening I walked past the restaurant where it had all unraveled. Lanterns glowed on the rooftop, another couple celebrating, laughter carried on the wind. I paused, remembering the moment the slides changed, the collective gasp, the crack of her world collapsing. Some part of me thought I'd feel bitterness. Instead, I felt nothing but clarity. I'd carried her lies too long. I had given them breath, defended them, sacrificed for them. But that night, in front of everyone, I'd handed them back to her. She bore them now. They belonged to her, and only her. That was the cleanest cut of all. As the sky deepened, I leaned on the railing and let the noise of the city fold around me. My reflection shimmered in the glass of the building across the street, thinner, older, but steadier. I touched the place on my chest where fear used to live. It was quiet now. Revenge isn't always fire and fury. Sometimes it's walking away with your life intact, leaving the liar alone with her ruins. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's peace. I turned from the rooftop and walked into the night, free at last from the sickness that had never been cancer, but deception. And as the wind lifted my collar, I whispered to myself the only vow worth keeping. Never again.